Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Build versus Buy, Unleashing the Power of Decision Engines for Automation. My name is Matt Tepper and I am Vice President of Global Marketing here at GDS Link. And I'm thrilled to have all of you here with us today. With over 18 years of experience in financial decisioning, GDS Link has a rich history of helping lenders and institutions optimize their credit operations. Today, we'll draw on that extensive expertise to address a critical decision many organizations face, whether to build or buy a decision engine. This choice is pivotal in shaping the efficiency, scalability, and long-term success of your operations. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our esteemed speakers who will be leading today's discussion. First, I'd like to welcome Yves Duhoux, Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of GDS Link. Yves has a wealth of experience designing and implementing enterprise decision systems worldwide, particularly for Fortune 100 companies. His insights into technology driving GDS Link are truly invaluable. Welcome, Yves.
Nice to be here, Matt. Thank you.
Next, we have Adam Taylor, our Global Pre-Sales Consulting Director. Adam's extensive industry experience and proven track record in driving technology for decision-making and analytics will provide us with the practical applications of our latest innovations. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Matt. Excited to jump into today's topics.
We do have a focused agenda today, exploring the critical decision of whether to build or buy a decision engine and the significant benefits of investing in a pre-built solution. Our discussion will cover key considerations like challenges, cost savings, scalability, and much more. Before we dive into the specifics, I want to remind everyone that we will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You are welcome to submit your question at any time using the chat feature or the Q&A button in your Zoom interface. To keep our session streamlined, we will address all questions during the Q&A portion. I also want to highlight that today's session is being recorded, and a copy of the replay as well as today's slides will be sent out to all of you attending later today. Without further ado, let's get started with exploring the first topic, one that I know is at the top of all of our attendees. Yves, when companies must decide between building and buying a decision engine, the choice is anything but straightforward. Even when opting to buy, there's a significant need for customization, integration, and ongoing management. How should organizations strategically determine which components are best built in-house versus purchased?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think build versus buy, is a term we often use or we hear pretty often. It's not really the right question, right? It's never that simple. I think it's what to build versus what to buy. You always end up building something unless it's a very specific scenario where you buy a bank in a box, but you always have as a company to build something, right? So the question shifts a little bit from build versus buy to what to build and what to buy. And I think a good rule of thumb is you should build what you're good at building, right? And you should build what will contain your secret sauce, and you should build what will make your processes easier. So in the context of a decision engine, in my mind, the real focus is building the ecosystem around it. A decision engine in itself is just a fairly small part of the entire lending ecosystem, right? From origination of an application to management of a portfolio. And there's a lot of things that need to be built around it so that you can take advantage of the decision engine capabilities.
Thank you for that, Yves. Given the complexities involved in making this strategic choice, it's clear that building a decision engine from scratch is no small feat. Sticking with you here, Yves, considering the complexity you've highlighted, what are the specific challenges companies face when they decide to develop a decision engine entirely in-house?
Thank you. So let's say you've decided, as Matt said, that you do want to build your own decision engine. So there's typically two paths, right? And that's what we observe the most. You have two choices. You can hard code your strategies. You know what you want your decisioning to look like. You can hire 1, 2, 3 developers and hard code your strategies. It's not always a bad option. It's typically quickest way to production, right? Challenges with that approach come later. If you have a dedicated group of focused engineers, you will get something off the ground quickly. But then the challenge comes when it's time to either maintain your code or explain the decision made by your code, right? Very much so with developers, everybody has a little bit their own style. And so Joe built the first version of Decision Engine, and then Joe decided to go work for another company. You need to hire somebody that then need to understand Joe's code and find out where it was stored and which version is running in production, and how do you audit it? How do you show auditors the reasoning behind the decision that was made 3 years ago with a version of the code you don't have anymore? So on top of that, the hard-coded solution means you will always need software developers on staff, which typically are a more expensive type of resources to maintain your solution. And you also potentially are within your IT funnel, and therefore you get prioritized. The changes get prioritized with IT projects, which is a thing most of the time you will want to avoid. So that's one of the approach you can take when you want to build. The second approach that you can take when you want to build is to try to avoid those pitfalls. And therefore, rather than hard-coded your solution, you will build, your IT team will build a capability so that your credit team can implement their decisioning strategy. So in essence, you're building a tool that will then be used internally with by your credit risk team. That's the way we do it, right? We're building a tool that can be used. That's the way commercial decision engines are working. But the challenge with that is you're setting yourself on the path to build a commercial decision engine. And as a lender, is it really something you want to do, right? Is it your core area of expertise? Probably not. But if you decide to go that way, you need to consider that it takes a lot longer to build the capabilities than it does to hard code, right? So you will have a much slower time to market, potentially more expensive. I've seen very few people do it well. It's doable. It gets pretty expensive, right? It's you don't know what you don't know, and unless you've done that for many years, you'll fall into the same pitfall than most decision engine company have fallen into when they were starting. It's the right, if you're going to do it, that's the right way to do it. It's expensive and lengthy, as was my answer.
So yeah, it's evident these challenges are multifaceted, whether it's comes to expenses, personnel. It's crucial to weigh the risk and benefits of both approaches. Adam, turning to you, based on your experiences, how do companies effectively balance the risks and benefits when choosing to build versus buy? Are there any common misconceptions that often complicate this decision?
Absolutely. If I had to pick out, one word that can really balance both sides, it's the predictability. So if you think about the infrastructure, timelines, and cost predictability in both scenarios, with a pre-built decision engine, you can quickly get to a pricing range and timeline range and kind of what resources are available. They've done it before. They can guide you on, what you may need internally. When you're building it yourself, especially if you're building the tools to enable your business users to change and test and do all the things they need to do for their daily jobs, there's just a lot of unknowns. And the pre-built solutions, they've already gone through all those hurdles. They've faced those challenges. They got a diverse range of customers. And so there's less guessing in that scenario versus, when you're getting something off the ground. As Yves mentioned, to hard code something, you can get a couple of developers to knock some if-then statements out pretty easily. It's what happens next. How do you update that policy? What if you won't need to duplicate it? What if you need to test? There's all these other intricacies to it that, it's not the glamorous part. It's the necessary parts of the platform that, especially in our industry, is required.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. So obviously we've kind of touched on a lot of different things that folks need to weigh. Obviously, Adam kind of touched on, the predictability that comes with buying a solution rather than building. But one critical aspect that we haven't touched on quite yet is infrastructure required for a successful build. Yves, considering the high costs and complexities involved, particularly for financial institutions who are inherently not technology providers, what are the key challenges these organizations should consider when adopting an in-house build that also requires hosting?
Yeah, it's a good question. So some people do it very well, right? But I think the key driver there is, if you're building your own solution, the assumption is you will gonna have to host it yourself, right? When you work with a vendor, you have the choice. Some of our clients host themselves our solution very successfully, right? They do it great. And for a lot of our other clients, we host for them. If you build your own, chances are you will have to host it yourself. And so alongside that, it's one thing to build a solution. It's something different yet to productionalize it, right? With everything that entails. So obviously you have hardware cost, but that's the easy one. But then you need to support it. You need to monitor it. You need people on staff 24/7 that can react to a condition or a situation. You need to make sure it scales with your traffic. You need to make sure that it generates data you need to be able to audit. So it's just another layer of cost, right? On top of building yourself that you may not be thinking about initially. Again, there are customers that do it very, very well, right? So it's not a showstopper. It's just more of a consideration, really, before you embark on the journey to build yourself.
Yeah, so obviously the need for a robust infrastructure, the ability to provide, consistent support. It seems that a lot of the decision-making process when it comes to this build versus buy dilemma can obviously really vary greatly depending on the size and the maturity of the organization. Yves, how does the decision-making process differ between startups and established companies when it comes to building versus buying? What unique factors should each type of organization consider?
It's a very interesting question, and the result, at least to me, and again, this is based on working with customer and my observation, right? It may not apply to everybody, but to me, the results are a little bit counterintuitive. You would think that startup will start and build everything themselves, and what I found over the years is startups actually tend to buy components, right? They will go out, find the best of breed, and assemble an ecosystem with best of breed components. And then almost always, a few years within their journey, they decide to build. And I'm not sure why, but very often there's an inflection point where 3, 5, 6 years into it, the startup that's now matured into a young company decide to go ahead and build everything themselves. And I've seen it happen many times. And almost always as well, 2, 3, 4 years into that, they decide to scrap everything they've built and they go back to buying components. I'm not sure I can explain it. I'm not sure why, but I think once they are finally a mature company, I think maybe they just realize that what's really important is everything around the components. It doesn't make a ton of sense to spend money building a decision engine, right? Where you need to spend your money, and I'm convinced of that, is everything around it, right? The success or failure of a landing system is not really the decision engine. It's everything that you build to make your process go better. Automating your testing based on the data you have, right? The ability to submit large amount of data to your decision engine to validate the changes you make, or to validate a new product line. The ability to gather the data and have a solid enough business intelligence environment to see the impact of your decisions, right, very quickly, and see the impact of the changes you're making. The ability to deploy multiple versions of your policy in production quickly. The ability to iterate quickly on your models, right? Where you want to spend your money is really where your secret sauce is. You want your data scientists to crank up new models quickly, right? So that you can have better performance across your portfolio and the ability to push those models and test them in production. This is really where the difference making happens. And going back to your initial question, eventually, company, when they mature enough, realize that this is important. And the most successful lending ecosystem I've seen are lending ecosystem when people have placed a lot of development time on those peripheral processes, right?
Yeah, and I know it's something that we've started to see across both startups and established organizations, maybe kind of learning from past mistakes of other companies. We're starting to see more organizations starting to adapt a little bit of a hybrid approach, where they will combine, best-in-class vendor components with their own in-house resources. We've certainly seen that gain some traction as of late. Maybe I'll start with you, Adam, but this is a question for both of you. What makes this hybrid approach effective? And can you share some examples of where it's succeeded, or conversely, faced challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the key buzzwords out there that's been going on for the last few years is the digital transformation, that the financial industry is undertaking. And the core of that is the customer journey. You've touched on this a little earlier. Every time a customer interacts with a financial institution, what is that experience? And how do you make that the best possible experience? And so, that tends to be the more secret sauce type of what we see people that needs to really build in that hybrid approach. That's their unique experience for the customers. And we're empowering that through data orchestration and decisioning components, but we're just one component in that full customer journey. There's everything they interact with in the front end, the type of app, the type of online application, the types of follow-ups and touch points you have with them when they get approved, and then, all the online banking and various things that happen afterwards to manage that loan and that customer. Those are the experiences that people will set people apart. And so, that's what we see people with that hybrid approach focusing, building those experiences and then utilizing an engine that, can help inform and get them the data they need when they need it.
You're exactly right, Adam. I think, and I do think vendors don't always do a good job at communicating that with the client, right? And sometimes us included. It's always a hybrid approach. It has to be a hybrid approach, right? And because there's so many systems interconnected, and again, the decision engine is at the center of many of those ecosystems, but it's only a part of it. And regardless of the quality of the decision engine you end up buying, the pass or fail, the make or break really is the quality of the integration and the systems that are built around it, right? The plumbing and access up to the data and the reporting. And so it's always a hybrid approach. And going into the creation of a new lending system, I think everybody should start with a hybrid approach in mind, because there's really no other way.
Yeah, and it seems like this hybrid approach is really kind of a bit of the epitome of really the kind of the truly nuanced like internal analysis that needs to be done, seeing what sort of resource you already have in-house, where are there shortcomings. It kind of just really epitomizes that, there's a lot of complexity that goes into this build versus buy decision. Now I want to kind of turn our attention to the benefits of pre-built solutions. Obviously, Yves, we've touched on the complexities of building versus buying. Could you break down the cost savings that companies can anticipate when choosing a pre-built decision engine over building one from scratch?
So I think we need to think about costs in two ways, right? You have your initial cost and then you have your ongoing cost. If you just look at initial costs, sometimes it may be cheaper to hire 2 developers and hard code your strategies. It's a strong possibility, right? It may be cheaper, it may be faster as well. So, and for some people, maybe it's the right thing to do, right? If you have a business with a low velocity of changes and you know that your strategy is not going to evolve very much and it's pretty black and white, and that's for the foreseeable future, maybe you should do that, and that's not a bad option. But if you think about cost on the longer term, then you need to think about a few things. One is the type of resources you will need over the years to maintain your strategies, your decisioning strategies, your data integration, and all of that. If you have a system that requires a lot of developers to operate, then you may end up with a higher cost of ownership. You need to consider the cost of hosting, right? If you need to build your own hosting environment and hire the teams to support it, to monitor it, and your security team to make sure that it's safe, that goes into the total cost of ownership. And then if you have a hard-coded solution and if you are not able to have the velocity of changes you want, right? Because you're in the IT pipeline of a larger organization, and therefore you get prioritized against other IT projects that are not related to decisioning, then there's also an opportunity cost there, maybe, right? You want to launch a new product, but you're delayed a few months because you're prioritized down. There may be an opportunity cost there. It's a little bit harder to quantify, but it's also a real cost.
Yeah. And along with cost savings, I know another critical advantage for a pre-built decision engine is time to market. Adam, how does opting for a pre-built solution accelerate this process compared to building from the ground up?
Yeah, especially if you're taking out that, quick hard code of a specific process, you take that out. What a pre-built solution has is a set of tools. And so we've been talking about resources a lot too, is, those aren't developers that need to configure the tools in order to make the strategies. And so all the kind of levers you pull to take a customer through a decisioning journey, it's already there. It's already available to use. It's just configuring, right? It's not developing anymore. The other big thing is the infrastructure. Having to put that in place. With a pre-built solution, the infrastructure is there. It's more you're choosing how much of it you want to take ownership of or not, and how much power you need. So it's just given all the tools that are purposely built for more regular people to get in there and utilize. It makes it much faster to make changes, to do something, have UAT testing, check it, change it again, change it again, change it again until you're actually in production with what the client desires. Having to do that, with a hard-coded developer, it just takes longer. So Again, some of the key benefits of time to market is all the tools available that are already vetted and already out there in the wild.
Yves, one of the often cited advantages of pre-built solutions is the access to the latest cutting edge technology, as well as the continuous updates that come with it. How does this benefit actually play out in real world scenarios?
So, I mean, it is the fact that if you buy a product from a good vendor, right, you'll have a vendor that has many clients and that by default will have to keep their technology up to date, right? And keeping the technology up to date means many things to many people. I'd say one of the key component to that is keeping the technology up to date from a security standard, right? There's always a lot of every programming language of every operating system needs to be patched or updated pretty regularly just to fix known vulnerabilities. And any reputable vendor will have to do that, right? So there's a new technology component to that, but I don't think we need to we want to forget about just making sure you stay up to date from support standpoint and security standpoint. And then yes, there's the ability to extend the platform. So you buy a capability today, you want to make sure that in 5 years, so 10 years ago, nobody was talking about Python, right? So none of the platform you would buy would allow you to implement your machine learning model in Python. If you bought a decision engine 5 years ago from a reputable vendor, their version today should include the ability to run Python, for example, right? That's the that's the benefit you receive from them keeping up to date. I think, and I'm gonna mess up your agenda a little bit here, but with working with a vendor, so you have access to technology, you have access to update. I think just as important, if not more, you have access to people, right? And so just as the technological landscape changes over the years, the lending landscape does too, right? And so you also have access, or you should have access to people that can help you navigate it a little bit, right? And guide you through what other people are doing in terms of verifying identities or understanding buying power of their applicants. So a vendor typically will have a team, right? A team of technologists you can speak with, or a team of consultants you can speak with that you may build in-house if you build, but that's always a good resource to exploit.
Yeah, and I think that acts as actually a perfect segue to our next question. Obviously, the extra personnel on hand and at an organization's disposal might also kind of provide them the ability to kind of scale a little bit faster. So, Yves, could you elaborate on how pre-built solutions also provide scalability, flexibility that companies need as they grow and as their requirements evolve?
Yeah. So there's two kinds of scalability, flexibility. I think you were referring with additional in terms of resources. I mean, the team typically there's many models, but often the vendors team ends up being an extension a little bit of your in-house team, right? And there's cases where I know we have customers for whom we are really the keeper of the knowledge, right? It's actually pretty amazing. We have customers who go through turnover sometime, right, in their team, and our team is really the keeper of their knowledge in terms of their decision strategies and all of that. So in that sense, it's really a resource scalability, right? Where you can have increase the size of your team if you decide to work on 3, 4, 5 projects at the same time by leveraging your vendor. There's also a technical side to scalability and flexibility, obviously. So if your business grows dramatically and or if you want to expand the number of lines of business you're in, you want to make sure that you choose a vendor, and typically when you choose a vendor rather than building yourself, that can cope with those rapid volume changes or the multiplication of your environment. It's serious decision engine vendors should be able to provide that to you, whereas if you were to build yourself, it may not be something you took into consideration initially.
And as ubiquitous of a term that AI has become in last 12, 18 months, artificial intelligence and machine learning capacities have become increasingly integral in decision engines for years now. How do pre-built solutions ensure that AI and ML capabilities are fully integrated and maintained? I'll pose that one to you, Adam.
Yeah, and AI definitely been in the news here over the last couple of years, and just gaining steam. But let's still step back and focus on if the infrastructure is not there, right? If you're not always on, people nowadays expect an instant decision. If I'm surfing out there looking for a new mortgage rate or various personal loan for X, Y, and Z, I want to get pre-approved immediately. I want to be able to use it as leverage and move on to the next thing as I have life to also deal with. So if the blocking and tackling of your decision strategy, isn't up to snuff, then AI it doesn't mean anything to a lot of people. So, we don't want to get just lost in, the next new thing. What's really important is that your pre-built decision engine or your established decision engine already provides you the flexibility to integrate with the next best thing. And so that's certainly what we've taken steps to work really well with Python. So as whether it's machine learning or AI models that are being developed, we'll at least talk really well with them. In a lot of cases, host them directly in the platform, so that you have the fastest response time possible to get those answers back to the customers. So, a lot of things going on right now with that. More to share later as well. But the infrastructure is so important to make sure that the lights are on at all times and you're getting decisions as fast as possible.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it there, Adam, but vendor support obviously plays a crucial role in ensuring the long-term success of these solutions. How crucial is vendor support in ensuring the long-term success of a pre-built decision engine, especially as new technologies evolve?
Yeah, I mean, the most dramatic version of it is where your last line of defense, right? Where we're hosting your decision strategy, all that IT infrastructure. We're helping you keep the lights on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What often gets missed, and you touched on this earlier too, is the people. The people here that know what you're trying to do, that understand the policy that you have. As especially nowadays, people are changing jobs all the time, much more frequently than they did 5 years ago or 10 years ago. As people leave, knowledge leaves with them. And so we can be that central hub of information to keep the train on the tracks and keep it running smoothly, now and in the future.
Yeah, good stuff there, Adam. We've obviously covered a lot of ground today. Certainly want to thank both Adam and Yves for sharing their insights. Now we're eager to hear from you, our audience. As we move into the live Q&A portion of the webinar, this is your chance to kind of have Yves or Adam address any questions that we haven't covered today. If you haven't done so already, please submit your questions using the chat feature or the Q&A button in your Zoom interface. We'll obviously do our best to address as many as we can in the time that we have left. Do have one here that I'll kind of open up to either one of you. Yves, I know that you had kind of touched on a little bit earlier when it comes to some of the cost savings, but can we maybe kind of go into more detail about how do the long-term costs compare between building a decision engine and buying a pre-built solution?
Wow. Just that. Let me open the spreadsheet. It really depends on what you build, I think. So if you're building a capability, so if you're building your own decision engine as opposed as just building a decisioning strategy, I think your upfront cost will be much higher, right? Because you're not going to build a serious decision engine without 3, 4 people for 12 to 18 months, right? So that's your initial cost there. Versus, so yeah, you're probably going to be 3, 4 times more expensive initially than it would be to license a product. And then I guess the key there is you're not going to have a license to pay, right? Because you've built your own. So it's a matter of how many people you need to maintain it versus using an existing component, and how much it costs you to host it versus paying somebody else to do it. There's a scenario where you build a great decision engine, and it was well thought out, and you only need a couple of people to maintain it, and you know how to host it well, and the costs are pretty comparable. But there's a lot of if there. I think I don't know many financial institutions that successfully built a great decision engine. I do know of one that did years ago, and then they ended up becoming a vendor in the space because they did something well, but that's the exception. So I don't know if that was a very detailed answer. Sorry, I probably would need to think more about the actual numbers, but that's what I have.
No, thank you for that, Yves. Next question we have here: are there any particular industries where building in-house is almost always the better option, or is buying typically favored across the board? Adam, I'll let you take a stab at that one.
I mean, I don't know about specific industries. It's what kind of problem are you solving? So if what you're solving right now, is applicable for the short term, and there's going to be, a point where you're going to have to make a different decision later, like that's the opportune time to probably build something right now, fill that gap, and still do your assessment on, what else is out there, how can, what is the other landscape out there that could, give me more tools to be more flexible in the future. But it really comes more down to the problem you're solving and how complex it is, and then how much are you going to have to iterate on it, very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may jump in as well, sorry, Adam. I think it's a factor of complexity of the decisioning, velocity of the changes, and regulation, right? Regulatory pressure. Let me give you an example. If you're trying to, if you build a system that allow landlords to decide whether or not to extend the lease to a potential tenant, right? And the only thing you're doing is a KYC check and the FICO score cutoff. If you're building that system, unlikely to change dramatically, very few machine learning algorithms to decide if somebody has access to a studio in New York, right? So I'd hard code it. I'd hard code it, put a couple of parameters in database somewhere that you can update when you need to update them. And I think that's probably a better option. If you have a highly competitive lending situation where there's a lot of regulatory pressure, where you need to be able to explain every decisions you make, and you know that you're going to iterate, as Adam was saying, pretty quickly over your different strategies. So everything that probably most of you on the call, the type of industries you are in, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a decision engine, for sure.
Looks like we have one last question here. And again, if you do have any questions, feel free to submit them via the chat feature or the Q&A button in your Zoom interface. Can you provide some examples of when a hybrid approach has been more beneficial than building or buying? I guess if there's maybe some of those unique situations, kind of looking to get a little more insight there.
Who goes for it? Happy to answer.
We go ahead, I'll follow up.
So so it's a tough question because I don't have many experiences of non-hybrid approach, right? It's I've seen tentative of non-hybrid approach fail. I think it's unrealistic to think that you can rely on one vendor for your entire ecosystem, which would make it a non-hybrid approach, right? A purely vendor-led approach. There's always things, as I said many times already, things you need to buy. But the most successful hybrid approaches, I think, and we touched on that a little bit, that I've seen are really when customers focus on two things: making the little things easier, right? The integration between the decision engine and their ecosystem easier, when they can automate their testing, when they can automate really the release deployment, not just on the vendor side, but the entire CI/CD process, so the approval of the release, the testing of the release. There's customers out there, I'm thinking about one in particular, where they make changes in their decisioning logic, and then they have a process that will so they go through the deployment. They have a process that will deploy the file, bring it up internally, test against automatically, right, with no human intervention, test against millions of records, automatically decide if it's a pass or fail. If it's a fail, they generate a report that highlights everything, and then push it to the specific regions. And all of that takes, I don't know, less than an hour, all in, right? And that's the kind of things you can build on top of the decision engine. Obviously, a decision engine like ours, like others, give you the ability to do that testing, but there's more manual steps there. Whereas you can further take advantage of the capabilities and build really process that make your life easier, diminish the risk of having to do an emergency release. And so vendors or customers that focus on that typically are very successful. And then obviously there's your secret sauce, right? The back end of that, which is exploiting the data you extract from your current decisioning to further improve your decisioning, whether it's fine-tuning your strategies or retraining your machine learning models. This is, if I was to start a bank tomorrow and I start lending tomorrow, this is really where I would put all my energy on.
Adam, any additional color context you want to add there?
Yeah, not a lot. You did well, but we're built really well to, for the hybrid approach. Like that's what we're maximized for. We expect you to have, that customer journey figured out on the front end, and certainly informed throughout the process. Data in and out and data freedom are one of our core values, and getting it when you need it for whatever purpose, is the flexibility of a pre-built decision engine. So, I think we're maximized for that approach, and it really empowers our clients to focus on what they're good at. And, then we've got our purpose in that decision engine, and, everyone's working together to provide that great experience for all those borrowers out there.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Adam. Thank you, Yves, and
Of
thank
course.
you, everyone, for those questions. If you do have any additional follow-up inquiries, welcome to reach out to Yves, Adam, or myself following today's session. Before we wrap up today, again, want to just express my gratitude to Yves and Adam for their insightful contributions and all of you for your active participation. Before we wrap up, I want to highlight a few valuable resources here. If you haven't subscribed already, be sure to check out our podcast, The Lending Link, for in-depth discussions with industry leaders, available on all major platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music, to name a few. Some of our latest episodes include our discussion with the former CEO of FinTech Nexus on the future of fintech, and a sit-down conversation with the CEO of Nova Credit, which covers the latest developments within financial inclusion and the future of credit data. Likewise, please be sure to check out our new quarterly publication, The Sync Up, which offers expert opinions on credit risk, lending strategies, and the latest tech innovations. You can find that on our LinkedIn page at GDS Link on LinkedIn. Likewise, we've also recently launched a new ebook, Transforming Credit Risk into Competitive Advantage. It is now available for download at gdslink.com/2024 ebooks, and it is packed with actionable strategies for today's dynamic environment. And lastly, GDS Link will be in Nashville for Lend 360 from September 11th through the 13th, the 10th edition of the event. If you're attending, please be sure to visit our booth at booth number 208 to meet our team and explore our solutions. Again, want to thank all of you for your attendance today. A replay of today's discussion, as well as the slide deck, will be included in our follow-up email. Thank you all again, and have a great day.
Thank you,
Thank
Matt.
you.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody. You guys have a good day.